a unique car we're going to talk about.
Yeah, this one is a special one, for sure. Why don't you lead us in on it?
This car I purchased, they told me, said this car was originally owned by Louise Boyd. And I find it interesting that her last name is the same as my middle name.
Sure.
And that's about all they knew about it.
Yep.
I mean, I asked somebody, well, who is this person? And nobody really knew anything about her.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and she was as interesting in the time, and we're talking about 1934 12-cylinder Packard.
Yes.
But she was as interesting an explorer as Amelia Earhart was in her day.
That's right.
And she was prior to Amelia Earhart.
Yes. You know, this car had known history that belonged to her, and she had some history, you know, with Packard. And that was great, and there was some history about how she afforded the car, but that's really all that was known or divulged with when the car was made available for sale, right?
I can touch on a couple things that I know, and then you can fill in.
Sure, fire away.
So, it's a 34 Packard. Her family came from wealth.
Yes.
She had a 16-year-old brother and a 17-year-old brother that passed away, I think, of pneumonia.
I believe so.
And her father owned literally a gold mine.
Yeah.
And so she had extreme wealth in the 20s and 30s.
Yep.
Her parents passed away. She inherited all this money, and she was an explorer. I think she was the first person to map out Greenland.
It was through the American Geographic Society, I think is who it was. Not National Geographic, but the American Geographic Society. And she basically led an expedition to map Greenland, which this was in the 20s, right?
She was the first woman to fly over the North Pole.
She was the first Arctic explorer, female Arctic explorer, period. She killed 17 polar bears.
To do research.
Yeah, as you do. Let's study it. Bang. All right. So
we actually have photographs of this car in Poland.
Yeah.
In the late 30s. And you have to understand that Hitler took over Poland in, I think, 39.
Yes, so you're knocking on the door
of World War II.
Well, you already have the Nazi Party gaining traction in Germany at this point in time. It's not like you're talking a massive distance between these countries. So, yeah, to back up into that, she, being a Packard person and being one that liked to explore, she wanted a good car that she knew could take her around. So she had this car custom built, right, to go to Poland. She takes her trusted driver, Percy, and they end up riding around Poland in 1935 in
rough roads.
The pictures that we have, yeah, I mean, you're talking about ruts that are this deep. There were more sheep in Poland at that point in time than there were cars by orders of magnitude. There was a story with that car. I think I've talked to you about this, but they stopped at a monastery for a couple of nights, and the car was too big to fit in their carriage stables right there. So one of the monks from the monastery spent the night in the back seat of the car just to make sure nobody would mess with it. I mean, this is a huge car. It's an 1108 chassis, so it's the longest chassis effectively was available for Packard in that period. It is a four-door convertible sedan. I don't know if we mentioned that, but the fact that this young lady whose father was either owned a gold mine or he was an investment banker of some sorts, had a tremendous amount of money, left it to a 19-year-old Louise Arner Boyd who decided not to squander it away, but used it to become effectively a scientist, an explorer, and lead expeditions throughout some pretty treacherous terrain, and it clearly has fantastic taste in cars because she picked a 34 Packard full individual custom by Dietrich, takes it over to Poland, travels around, documents all this, comes back and writes a book about it that gets published, which is awesome, by the way, and then was largely forgotten. Unfortunately, she made some decisions later on in life financially that left her penniless, but she had an incredible story leading up to, this time in Poland and whatnot, and now you get a chance to tell it through this car.
Well, speaking of stories, because you always like it when there's a story behind a car.
Oh, absolutely.
So I'm going to lead into this. I'm going to let you take it over. She shot polar bears.
Sure.
I mean, with a rifle, not a camera.
No. Maybe both.
So we have photographs of this car in Poland.
Yes.
and we looked at the hood ornament, and it wasn't a standard Packard hood ornament.
No.
I'm going to let you share the story on how somebody in your office found the hood ornament.
So, we have the photos from, and there are 2 shots that actually show the hood ornament well enough to say, okay, this isn't a standard. It wasn't
Cormorant.
No, it wasn't a Cormorant. It wasn't a standard Packard emblem. It wasn't a Leak. This was something different. And
it wasn't the Goddess of Speed.
It was not. It wasn't the donut pusher. It wasn't any of those things. So we were able to enhance the photo, adjusting contrast and everything else to kind of get a better look at what was going on there, reduce the highlights, take out the shadows, and we were able to determine, hey, this is a polar bear. Well, one of my friends, Chris Summers, had said Chris is a fantastic researcher. He writes for RM. He's a young guy like me, younger than I am, so a younger guy than me. But he said, well, Louise Arner Boyd, she was the Arctic explorer. And I knew that, but then it clicked. I said, my God, this is a polar bear. So that starts this whole several months long journey of, we were talking to brokers, mascot brokers in the UK. We looked when we were over there doing London to Brighton at various places, just trying to see what might have been available as a polar bear mascot. Goose eggs. Didn't turn up anything, right? We thought, well, shoot, this isn't going to happen. Well, our research assistant, Daisy, a young lady that works for us, we were going through she's online one day and says, hey, there's a museum in California that has a bunch of personal items from her life and has a little display set up to her in this museum, and they wrote a book about her and all this jazz, and they have this archive. And I said, all right, well, let's go look at this archive. And she was breaking it down, and we're searching for polar bears. Well, there are several polar bear figurines in this whole thing, and she scrolls past one, and I said, stop, go back. She goes, I don't know if that could be it, because they put it on a base and angled it up. Well,
it's supposed to be an iceberg.
Yeah. So she goes back to it, she reads the description, and on the back of the picture of this, it says, for car mascot. And there are 2 holes in the bottom of it to mount it to the radiator cap. Oh. So, lo and behold, we reach out to Heather Powell, the lady that's director at the museum, strike up this conversation, and she said, yeah, that's her mascot from the Packard. I said, well, we have the car in our shop, and the phone goes silent.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, call him back. She's like, no, I'm still here. She said, we thought that car was destroyed. We had no idea it still existed. Had no clue. So what we ended up doing with that is, instead of taking it from her childhood home, which is where the gatehouse of her childhood home is where this museum is, instead of taking it from her childhood home, we ended up doing a 3D scan, a laser scan of it, and we have recreated it exactly as the original version, side-by-side comparison. We're casting it just like original, and it was white enameled to obviously reflect the polar bear. So that was connecting those 2 facets of this story, and now working with the Marin History Museum, University of Milwaukee at University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee, which has a big part of her archive and the photos and whatnot. We've been able to piece back some pretty tremendous aspects of the history of this car, and during the restoration, we are returning it to the exact configuration that it was when she had it in Poland.
And from the photographs, it was black with black wall tires.
Well, white wall tires.
White wall tires.
We knew it was a dark color, and as we were tearing apart a couple of areas that would have been atypical, that was restored in the 70s, and it would have been atypical for these areas to be removed, we found black paint, and we knew it was a dark interior from the photos. So we've been able to glean a lot of information, but she had several accessories on there. She had a standard factory accessory bumper guard for it's got a fold down tray for the trunk. There was actually a bumper accessory that was, if you were more commonly carrying a trunk, you could have that, so if somebody hit the back of your car, it didn't dent it in. It was a sprung kind of thing. Had extra bumper guards on it, a few different really unique things. And we're even making the original registration plates, because the car was shipped in through France and then put into Poland, so it has a French registration plate and a Polish license plate on it. So it's been a really neat endeavor to go back into this widely untold story about this woman and
Most people have never heard of her.
Exactly. And put together this car. And it's, with what we're doing, we're going to be able to kind of tell her story on a national scale for the first time ever. I hope that's what our goal is here, to bring that history back to life. You never get a chance to tell a story about a person like this, especially a woman in that period that was wealthy, that wasn't just a socialite, because that was kind of like the de facto profession. If you were a wealthy woman in the period, it's like, well, you have to be the socialite, right? Like, you're hosting the balls. Well, she was like, F that. We have this incredible photo of her on a ship, on a big mast sailboat, right? Getting ready to venture off into one thing. This photo, okay, it's black and white photo, obviously. She's sitting here, and it's like one of those, when you go to a fun house, and it's like the images that you feel like the eyes are following you.
No.
She's peering into your soul in this picture, and you can just see the intensity of this woman. And it for whatever reason, I saw that photo and I was like, it clicked. Like, she was a badass. Like, clearly, she was to think about doing Arctic exploration at that period of time.
And shoot polar bears.
Yeah. Period. I wouldn't go to the Arctic now. And I love cold weather. Forget that. But this story is such a huge part of this car, but it transcends this car tremendously. I mean, it's such a rare opportunity to be able to tell the story of a person like that just hasn't been told. It's wild. So 34, we know we know the history.
Dietrich custom body.
Yeah, we know it's, at this point in time, Dietrich was literally across the road from Packard. So you would have called into Packard and say, hey, I want to do an individual custom. LeBaron and Dietrich were kind of the two major ones that you could choose from at that point in time. Dietrich's styling was a lot more classic. LeBaron's styling was a lot more curvaceous, pontoon fenders and things like that. And just based upon what the descriptions of Louise Arner Boyd are, it makes sense why she went with Dietrich. Plus the fact that it was a four-door convertible sedan, and I don't think LeBaron offered one in 34. But she wanted a car that you could have a roll-up divider window on, or have the top down on, and have either wind blockage or private conversations. So there were, per the records that I have from Daniel Blackman and 50 years of statistical research, there were 12 of these cars built originally. And just the car alone is extremely rare in that respect. But yeah, you couple that with the fact that it went overseas, that was to take a Dietrich Packard, I mean, that's like, I could see if you got like a Ford Model A, right, and you ran it around, or if whatever, it's a $400 car. It was expensive, but it wasn't like, wealth to take that. But to take that car, to ship it over there, to have it there for all the months that she was there, to have it survive the ridiculous roads. I don't even call it roads. Just
survive World War II.
Yeah. I'm excited about this car for different reasons. I love the aesthetics. I love the rarity of it. But to get the opportunity to tell that story about her, that's one thing I admire about you. You have been a big proponent of, you're great with having strong women in your organization, strong women with, the way that you run your collection.
Half my direct reports in my business are women.
Yes, and I love that. I love that, and I love that you have the Amelia Earhart car, and I think that the complement of these two cars, talking about women in the period that were car people, women in the period that were impressive in their own pursuits, were
accomplished,
defying social norms, and defining a new wave of what women were doing in that period of time. I think it's incredible. I'm so thrilled to get the opportunity to bring this story to life with this car. Through the mascot, through your efforts, through things like this. I mean, it's going to be incredible. And there's no way that it can't, because who has a white polar bear mascot, right? It's such an odd, it's just so odd to see that.
You were like a kid when you called me and you guys had found it. Oh my God, you're not going to believe what we found. I'm like, okay, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
We found the hood ornament.
I know. I mean, there were like audible cheer. We announced it over the PA system at the shop.
Did you really?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. That is, to tie that back, it's like having, the crown jewels in the the main ruby is missing from it, and all of a sudden you bring it back together. It's such a part of that story that is such a unique way to succinctly quantify who the owner of that car was. And I mean, it's kind of like we did one of the.
And you can track it all the way back. She was the original owner.
Yes, it's similar to when we discussed the Amelia Earhart cord, the fact that she had a compass, navigational compass in that, right? That's very indicative of who she was as an individual. You don't see that oftentimes, something that translates the personality of the owner with these cars, but that in such a succinct and clear way. But that polar bear, it's a calling card for who she was as the Arctic explorer, and that's super important.
Do you know of any other car, Packard or other mark, that had a distinctive hood ornament that was tied to the original owner, like this polar bear is? I mean, Packard's had some unique hood ornaments, but they weren't individual to that one particular owner. I don't know of another car that has that.
I'm sure in the wide world of collector cars, there was probably another owner at some point in time that commissioned a unique hood ornament. I can't speak to what that is.
I don't know of another one.
But I've seen a lot of cars in my day. Not anything that even comes close to defining who that person was.
Right.
There may have been, it's like putting a Lalique on it, right? An owner in period might have picked a Lalique that they liked aesthetically, and maybe it represented something about them.
But it wasn't individual to that person.
Sure. So yeah, that is such a unique fingerprint on this car. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but that is a wildly important part of the history of this vehicle is that one small little polar bear
walking on an iceberg.
Yeah, but how incredible is that?
Yeah.
So yes, needless to say, there was an announcement over the PA system, and there were high fives and hugs that were given, because that's reuniting history, and that's what this is all about.
It is history, preservation of history.